Okay. Okay. Let's see. Okay, there we are. Welcome everybody to another stream. Yesterday we test piloted this new format that I'll be doing more often, just to catch up on certain news, give out some uh, feedback, and just an analysis. Yesterday we talked about the common denominator of the Kurds. Just to give a little bit more insight on that, the reason why I chose that expression, common denominator, is because we see that there's a war in Syria, Iraq, Iran, and also in the eastern part of Turkey. And the common denominator in terms of the people involved is the Kurdish people. That's why, because somebody sent me a message saying, what do you mean by common denominator? And essentially, they are the common denominator of all those countries that have different political establishments, religious fundamentals. So it's very interesting to see the development there, because that will determine the change of the maps. What else did we talk about? Of course, we talked about the Ukrainian thing. I want to leave that part because I do believe it's a quagmire right now, and all signs are indicating that this is going to go on for a very long time. But we have a lot of new developments that just happened in a day or two. Crazy. So Washington is accusing the Russian establishment of using in the stratosphere these type of missiles that will do damage to the American satellites. Months ago, there was an update that there's a new GPS system that the military of the US is operating in order to get out of the widely used GPS system. I didn't study too much of that. I didn't research a lot, but it's very interesting because I know from experience serving in the special forces and later doing my uh, contractual work with maritime security for the Somali pirates and Yemen pirates. I was in the Indian Ocean for a year, patrolling those passages there. Very interesting times. But I know that any technology that is tested in the military takes some time and to adapt to the systems, and then of course it's pushed down to the consumer later on. So everything that we see now that we operate, our computers, the internet, all of that once upon a time was first piloted by the army. So it's no surprise there, but it's very interesting to see what's going on, because if this happens, and I do believe that in this coming year, in the years to come, we're going to see internet, telecom, hackings, um, global point system attacks. So navigation is going to be a huge problem. So for the future military to adapt to this, it's going to take a lot, because we're seeing a financial war, military war, but now we're going to see a war on technology. So we have to be careful, because there might be people around the world that might lose their internet or their telecom reception. So that's very interesting, because this is the new war in the stratosphere right now, right? And there is just so many satellites going on, and for sure we're going to see some of this attack unfold. And it's very interesting that Washington is accusing Moscow, because we all know that Moscow has a lot of advanced technologies since the Soviet Union. But the US has been doing a lot of shady things too, and a lot of weather engineering. The British actually and the US have been doing a lot of weather engineering and a lot of different other things in order to, because war operates on many different levels, right? It's not just the military or the bootstrap on land or the Navy, for instance. We see that war takes into different factions, and especially when it comes to the satellite war, that's going to be very interesting. But I know for a fact that the US and the British intelligence has weather engineering technologies. Echelon. Yeah, there we go. If you guys Google Echelon for Britain, they're behind that. And I forget the US. I forget the acronym that they have for the weather engineering, but Russia does it. I mean, in the Middle East, they've been hacking with the weather for years now in order to make it rain, etc. So, anyways, very interesting things to keep in mind. So, what else? And this is a general. This is sort of like the general idea behind this. I want to do light digestion of certain news because I don't know about you, but after COVID, I've noticed that the events unfolding on many fronts is massive. It's as if the world was slowing down purposely, and now everything is at a warp speed. It's really hard for somebody who has a similar channel to get in touch with a lot of different topics and go dive deep. I have a thing. I like to read something to the bone. If I'm interested in it, I want to learn everything about it. And it's very hard to do these days based on everything that's going on. So, one interesting development I wanted to bring in to your attention. Sorry, let me lower this down because it's a little bit too high for me. I'm not that tall. Um, yeah, in the Middle East right now. So, I mentioned yesterday I have followers from around the world, namely Mediterranean region, but in North America. But right now, it has come to my attention that the U.S. and Israeli military has been conducting a lot of Air Force drills and particularly strikes in order to hit Iran. I want to bring this to your attention. I want to bring this to your attention because personally, I'm always a critic. I always like to look things holistically, never judge from the first cover or whatever government official tells me. Isn't it bizarre that all the places in the world right now where you have protests, and I'm not going to go into whether or not I'm supporting the protest or not. I support democracy, so obviously everybody to protest, even people who are protesting against me, they have the right, right? Okay, my point is this though: all the countries that the U.S. is at war with are having protests, are having regime changing protests. Why do I bring this up? Because during Obama, the most blatant proxy infiltration was during Obama's administration in the Arab, more appropriately, Maghreb region of North Africa. Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt with the Muslim Brotherhood that Obama was supporting. Whether or not he was a Muslim or not, we can't tell. But there were lots of pictures, lots of evidence from people who were saying that he is a practicing Muslim. But it was very interesting to see that all those countries that the U.S. wanted a regime change occurred. So now we're seeing protests in China. The protests in China are not in random places, but they're places specifically of high industrial hubs, high industrial centers of China. And of course, China, I'm going to do a video on China. I have a lot of information on China, guys. China is the giant with glass feet. It's an expression many countries use for China. The one child policy has decimated their demographics. They have, I believe, close to 20 million single males. Now, any society that has a large number of single males is in trouble. Because obviously the hormones are running wild. If you cannot find a job for them to hone in their skills and their attention, well, watch out. Gang activity and other anti-establishment things will take place there. So that's very dangerous. A young single male in large numbers is a headache for any government. But the point is that here in Iran, here meaning the column that is brought to my attention, Iran has been having protests for a very long time, and although it started with a female that was killed by one of the police there, it spiraled into more than just that. They're now trying to push back on the establishment rules for the hijab with women, etc., etc. Now, we know that the Shiites are very radical, very extremist. We would call them, at least in their eyes, they're just doing what they believe in. But we have to be careful here, because if the US is really trying to infiltrate, and it has ways of infiltrating with agent provocateurs and other third parties that are independent and hire protesters who are armed, we might see a high number of civil wars, civic wars in cities that will erupt with foreign entities coming in trying to overthrow a regime. This happened all over the world. I mean, Libya is the best example with Gaddafi there, but very interesting to see that Israel and the United States have ramped up their activity for Air Force attack. They've also used different other components there, but very intriguing. I wonder if this is just a show, or if this is actually, I mean, aside from it being a signal to Iran that, hey, you're next, this could spark into, and this is my fear, that Ukraine was just the beginning. Remember, I said in this video some time ago, I don't remember which video it was, but it was, I believe it was the video Wars Coming with Ukraine. I said that Ukraine will be the center where the war will erupt, and all the other parts of the world that have exacerbated solutions to bring unity there will just erupt. Things will just naturally erupt, and we're seeing this. And my fear is that war is going to start in the eastern fronts. Middle East, Africa, Asia, and be careful, because this might be the prelude to World War III. Hopefully, World War III is not going to be with the use of nuclear, and I think a lot of countries know this, so they're using other tactics. But yeah, very interesting in the front of the Mediterranean as well. Lebanon and Israel have come to a really good agreement for both in terms of drilling natural gas and exploiting their natural resources. And obviously Cyprus and Lebanon is yet. And this puts a dent to the Turkish revisionist strategies that have been plaguing the entire region forever. I mean, there's no other, aside from the US, there's no other country responsible for more genocide, crimes against humanity. It is. And I grew up. I had many fellow Turkish friends. Some of them would be educated on the topic, some of them not. But it is really unfortunate to see that for a very long time they've gotten away with it. But it seemed like Turkish neighbors have had enough, and I don't blame them. Okay, a lot of blackouts in Europe. France is now looking good. Germany is now looking good. About 60% price hikes in Germany. France was lucky with the nuclear energy. Let's not forget, France depends 60 or 70% of their total electricity grid depends on nuclear energy. So this is a very interesting development, because France, because of the droughts there, had a lot of problems there, especially with the reactors. They couldn't cool off their reactors. So somebody chatted 50%, 42% in repair. I don't know what that is, John Paul. 50%, 42% in repair. Yeah, we have one member who has started a chat with some percentages. Not too sure what you mean, John Paul. 42% repair. Oh, for the nuclear reactor. Okay, so I'm guessing you're saying in France. I assume that's what you're talking about France. Um, but yeah, very interesting. Blinken, Secretary Blinken says that the Biden administration supports the protests in China. Yeah, with France. Thank you for that information. Appreciate that. Yeah, thanks, John Paul. Um, yeah, Europe is in a very tight spot, and luckily for them, they had France was supplying Belgium and other places as well with nuclear energy, but now obviously things are in a much more harder situation. But yeah, like I said, the Biden administration is supporting the protests in China. The protests in China. But notice the US didn't talk much about the Canadian protests that were against the government imposing the COVID mandatory policy there. We didn't hear support, but hey, if the enemy is having internal issues, we support what's going on. That's very, and this is the level of that shows you the relationship between the two governments, right? Uh, Ukraine rejects the proposal of Macron to receive Russian guarantee security for the ending of the war. Let's face it, Zelensky doesn't want the war to end. He doesn't want that because Ukraine is receiving a ton of money for that. And also, the reparations are going to be ridiculously high. And of course, already we know Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, George Soros are buying land in Ukraine. They're going to buy the entire country if Ukraine stands as they are, because I believe Ukraine is going to be cut in the middle. You're going to have the eastern part. I've met a lot of Ukrainians who are from the eastern side. They like Putin. They understand Putin. They're Orthodox. They don't like that Zelensky hasn't been respectful of the eastern Ukrainians. And of course, like we've said many times before in other videos, the war started back in 2014, and there are a lot of underlying issues there. Thanks, John Paul. You're leading the chat here. Europe will fall. Period. Yes, energy. Ask questions. I'm 5-star in defense of USA. Hey, absolutely. Well, when it comes to the US, we've covered so many things. In my opinion, although the US is in a very, very dangerous spot, they're also favorited, right? Because for a very long time, the US has been leading the dance worldwide. And that status quo is going to be very hard. They're not going to give up easily their world leadership. But if BRICS, in my opinion, if BRICS it goes ahead with the commodities and with the currencies, that's going to be very detrimental for the American dollar. It's going to lose its dominance there. But the US dollar is a flight for safety. We know that. I've done the same. When the US dollar was skyrocketing with the initial interest rate hikes, I bought more dollars. I ditched all my euro. I had lots of euro going back and forth to Europe. I ditched all my dollars and bought USD because I knew that this would be the situation here. The Federal Reserve leads the dance when it comes to central banks, but it does not print commodities or other important, valuable goods that other countries in the East primarily are producing, like we said. And you know what? It's a war of sanctions. You know, Russia doesn't want to have any price cap, but at the same time, they're like, look, you need our petrochemicals. These sanctions on Russia have been very small level. Uh, Europe still gets a lot of the crude oil and a lot of natural gas indirectly. So to say we're going to price cap a commodity is ridiculous. I've studied economy and economics, and in macroeconomy, you can never price predict the price of a commodity. It's very hard. In general, goods and services, there are tools and other uh, things that you instruments you can use in order to project. And especially, we have so many speculators with the future contracts that try to predict the price and push the price even higher. Oil, don't tell. So the barrel of oil right now is $80. A few days ago it was playing 78, $80. It went even lower before. Don't tell me a barrel of oil is worth $80. It's not. It's the speculators and all these contracts that are pushing the price so they can make money. And I'm personally shorting oil. I think that oil is going to go down given the recession that we will be entering pretty soon, and it could be detrimental for a lot of places of the world. We might see a major slowdown. And like I said in one of our previous videos, the number one red flag of a greater war that might happen is always either a commodity or a geoeconomic issues that are not being solved. As soon as you see big companies agree, worldwide, national, international companies agree to the commodities, be it price or what have you, there's not going to be any war. Even if there's hatred, even if the politicians are saying different things. As soon as you see commodities and prices and the value of certain things not be on an agreeable level, that's when war comes. That's the number one red flag. John Paul, thank you so much. Thank you so much. No, Russia, I don't think it will be affected by the sanctions. You're absolutely right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And China, Saudi Arabia and China this Friday, 3.5 billion of people will face a lack of food. Yeah. And like we've said on this channel before, and there are amazing analysts out there, the fertilizers has been a major issue, and we've seen this years ago. This is not a new phenomenon. The price of fertilizers was jumping, and here in North America and in Canada specifically, where I live, I go back and forth Europe and Canada. Here we have a lot of potash, we have a lot of other fertilizers, but in countries like in Africa or even parts of Asia, where not only because COVID made things worse, but especially with the Ukrainian war, they're already in serious famine. And again, the world leaders have expressed that they want the world to depopulate. This is not a conspiracy, but of course, history is full of conspiracies. But they want to depopulate the world. So this has been a plan all along. The Rockefeller, if you look at the Rockefellers back in the 90s, they went in front of the UN and they were saying, we're too many people. We need to think about what overpopulation will bring. Meanwhile, you have scientists who are showing that the Earth has abundant resources for up to 20 billion people. So why is that? But yeah, Russia is not going to be affected by the sanctions. And my fear is that not only will the sanctions create more backdoor deals and smuggling like it did to Iran. In Iran, for instance, and this is worth doing a video about it. I've been interested in doing one video about it. So, John Paul, thank you for bringing this up. When Iran was blocked from the SWIFT payment, and they were one of the first major countries to be blocked from the SWIFT payment, they found backdoor deals with other countries that already had accounts in the SWIFT and were receiving dollars. So they were smuggling and they were doing a lot of bartering. When I was in the Middle East and we were in Yemen and Somalia, because we were, again, in that corridor there, we would see ships that were carrying a lot of goods, and we couldn't track them on the GPS. We weren't allowed to say anything, and we were told that these are smugglers from Dubai, which Dubai is the heaven of smugglers, right? And they're bringing to Iran gold, US dollars, and a lot of other things that they were blocked from purchasing. Iran set a very interesting precedence for BRICS, how to operate in a non-dollar system, because that way they show to the world, look, you don't need the SWIFT or the dollar system. It's the Anglo-Saxon system. You can find backdoor deals and other methods to operate. And Iran is very impressed. I'm very impressed with Iran, how they've maintained their establishment for all this time. India consumes food to produce biofuel. Yes, in Canada, I'm in Toronto. I'm in the city of Toronto. I live there. Yeah, it's actually, it's now our winter is starting to is starting to kick in. Yeah. So you think the BRICS are going to make a mistake to replace the dollar when they want to use gold? You see, I don't know if it's just going to be gold, though. I think they might use their strongest commodities that produce. Oh, you're in Quebec. Awesome. Hey, that's amazing. Hey, we're living in the same country. That's awesome. Good for you, man. Quebec is beautiful. I was actually in Montreal last month. Beautiful city. Quebec is gorgeous. Ontario is a bit jealous of Quebec and Toronto of Montreal, I think. But yeah, beautiful place of over there. Very nice. But you're in okay, gotcha. But you're in the States. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. But yeah, about what's happening, I'm very concerned because we've never been in a point of time in history where we've had energy crisis, immigration, refugee crisis, military standoff, financial crisis, virus. The COVID war is not over, right? They're still pushing for more vaccines, more booster shots, even though the data is showing in virus, excuse me, that not only is it not helping, but it's making things worse, unfortunately. So yeah, and about COVID, I almost lost my channel because I brought up some interesting scientists who were saying, hey, I worked for Pfizer. Like, I had Robert Malone's information. I've had other scientists saying, hey, I worked for Pfizer, and these companies, don't trust all of the products. Sure, vaccines have done great for humanity, but they've also created lots of problems. In Africa, especially, we've noticed that there were contamination. But anyways, I'm digressing. I'm going to a lot of different topics here, but one thing I want to mention, I did a video on this, and maybe John Paul, you watched you watched this video about Orban. Orban said, the more we help Ukraine, the more we support this, the more Europe is going to be destroyed. And I like Orban. Certain things I might have some differences with him, but overall, he's closer to my political direction, and I really respect him. I listen to his speeches, just like Putin, just like Biden. I try to listen to the speeches, find the speeches, not listen to translations or other articles, because there's always tricky representations here, especially if they're not supporting the World Economic Forum or the greater agenda. So Orban, I made a video on him, how a lot of people in Hungary are satisfied with him. And in this case, Orban has been knocking on the door of Brussels saying, hey, you're going too far with this. You're pushing down the envelope a little bit too much. What's happening here? And Europe is suffering because of the sanctions. And unfortunately, that's the problem. We have an expression in Greek that when the buffaloes are fighting, the big animals, it's the insects that get destroyed or that die because of the huge clamoring, And in this situation, Europe, although it's one of the largest economies in the world, Brussels created such a lock, such a dependency to Russia. And now Europe is a sacrificial lamb. You may not be pro-Russian, that's fine. You may not be pro-Ukrainian, that's fine, or pro-American. But when your house depends on the energy production of one country, you can't just go from one day to another by shitting on it and saying, well, you know what, we'll figure it out. What are you going to do for the next winters? And they're saying this winter might not be that bad for Europe, but it's the winter after that that's going to create huge problems, because Russia's not going to back from the war. They're not stopping. This is a wear and tear war. They're not meant to go blitzkrieg. They didn't use their entire air force. And also the Constitution says that they had certain limitations because they also had their eastern population who are Russian speaking, and a lot of them are Orthodox. They didn't want to attack those areas and threaten to risk to kill their own population, right? So it's a very complicated situation. So Orban here, ringing the bell to Brussels and saying, hey, this will destroy Europe. Are you sure you want to go down that road where you commit so much to one basket, the US basket, as opposed to diversifying? And as a European, I always felt that Europe had a very hard task, which was to make sure that the South and North, East and West countries are all afloat together. And Germany, for a very long time, had cheap energy from Russia. Because let's not forget, and I don't know, John Paul, if you know this, but Merkel was working for the Eastern German establishment early on, which was pro-Soviet, was under the Soviet guise. So when she took power, everybody knew the relationship of Germany and Russia is going to be elevated during those years. And the chancellor before Merkel, I believe, Schroeder, he was the he became later the executive part of the executive board, I don't forget which position, of Rosneft. I believe it was Rosneft, which is a Russian entity in natural gas and hydrocarbons. So unfortunately, for a very long time, Europe committed a very irresponsible act to rely entirely on Russia. Of course, you have Norway, one of the wealthiest funds in the world. Norway, which up until the 50s and the 40s, their country was going to the shitter, but thankfully they discovered all this oil and gas. But we're in a very, very dangerous situation. And Russia, with now Surovikin general, is looking very, very fierce. This is not a laughing matter. Here in the West, we think, oh, Russia is losing the war. No. Russia is not losing the war. Russia has in its warehouses, in its arsenal, intense equipment dedicated for warfare. Russia is going all out, but not in one instant. It's a slow progression, like we said, in multiple waves to deplete the resources of Europe, Ukraine, NATO, etc. In this case, I feel I have more sympathy for the people of Europe because they're both suffering. And I do not like the demonization of Russia, because we all know that behind the media, most of the media in the West are bought by Anglo-Saxon intel services. So let me come back to the chat. Sorry, John Paul, you're good. Thank you. I appreciate your comments. And Ukraine already lost the war. Yeah, I do believe that, because if NATO and US pull out the plug in an instant, in a day, they're done. I salute, as an ex-soldier, I salute the effort of the Ukrainian people, not of the neo-Nazi factions, but there were a lot of people who fought very bravely, and I can relate with that. I understand that. I like that. But unfortunately, Ukraine is the puppet, and their we have an expression for the ancient Greek tragedy of Sophocles, Iphigenia, I believe is from Sophocles, which means it's a sacrifice for foreign interest, right? And Putin was very upfront about that. Ukraine already lost the war. My age, I don't feel comfortable disclosing, but I am older than I look. I'm older than I look. Turkey tried to invade 10 times Greece already, and stopped them. Yeah, yeah. Turkey. You see, Turkey is a very complicated situation because I feel bad for the people. Its military was never that strong. If you look at the battles that Turkey and the Ottomans, they only fought when they knew they had the numbers to fight. But in the Aegean, the ones who command the waters there are the Greeks because they know every nook and cranny. They know the details. The Navy war is a very complicated next level war. It's not the same as being on the steppes and having just millions of people fight, and numerically you get the advantage. And their air force is very disadvantaged. I've been in with officers who came off from NATO drills for the air force, and they were saying that nobody wanted to work with the Turkish pilots because they didn't have the training, they didn't have the capabilities, and Greece had to, because when you're a smaller country and you have many enemies, you have to develop a very advanced training. And yeah, Greece boasts, in terms of the training and the officers, and now the arsenal. They have one of the strongest armies in Europe. If you look at the tanks that Greece has, there are way more tanks in Greece than in Germany or France, which is surprising, right? But European countries now don't have a reason to train. When you have the Greek Air Force every day having invasions from Turkey, and they flank them and they send them off, that's training. You know, nowhere in Europe do you see that countries are close to warfare. So Turkey is not pulling the trigger because they know. And if Greece really attacks this time, because in the 90s they didn't want war, they pulled back many times, and so Turkey had some small victories just to feel good, uh, by putting their flag on an island, this small islet, etc. But yeah, if Turkey decides to start up a war, it's going to be a very bad one for Turkey, very very bad one for Turkey, because the air force is equipped with Exocet that has 1,000 kilometer radius attack accuracy, and some other air defense systems that are very very dangerous for Turkey to penetrate. So that's not going to be nice, because we saw what happened 2-3 years ago when the Turkish Navy was out. One of our warships ran into the Turkish fleet, and it took them. They had a delay to understand what was going on. So, and there are a lot of other things that were written in by NATO, saying that, yeah, we're not worried about Greece at all in that area. But if the eastern front of NATO blows up, watch out, because Turkey is now being used as a puppet by Russia. So that's going to be very interesting. Let me follow your questions there. Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. Huh. You know, yeah. So the situation there is, yeah, very very dangerous for them. If anything would happen, Turkey would be majorly disadvantaged. Majorly disadvantaged. There are two generals in Turkey who sent a report to Erdogan saying not to attack the Greek fleet because this and this and this would happen, and we're not prepared. Turkey has a good industrial production, but their weapons are not war equipped. Even the Bayraktar in Ukraine has been a total destruction. But Erdogan is a very good businessman, excellent businessman. He's a very cunning politician, but he's very predictable, very predictable. So yeah, I think we've covered a lot of topics here. But yeah, the one thing that we need to, if there were certain areas I would look ahead for, is be careful of new collision of Russia and the US more directly this time. Washington has expressed different things that Russia has done, different testings and different missiles to satellites. But also Lavrov, the foreign minister, has repeatedly said that US and NATO are now directly on ground of Ukraine, which we've known since 2 years ago when I announced that, you know what, there are Americans and British and Canadians who are training Ukrainians. And it's going to be very interesting because we in Canada too are a target, right? We're part of NATO. We're a very close ally to the US and the Anglo-Saxon axis. So that's going to be a very dangerous part if things really evolve to that level. So we need to be careful. And again, Israeli and US preparation indicating of strikes against Iran, that's something worrisome, because now you have Iran, Israel, right? And we know Israel plans to destroy Iran because Iran has been very forthcoming with their plans that they do not wish Israel to exist. They've been very clear about that. And they're very strong. So I wouldn't say very strong, but Iran has two armies. It's one of the, I don't know another country that has two armies. One is the Liberation Front that controls that part of the Indian Ocean, which is very dangerous. I've been there many times, and it was we had not only the Somali pirates and the Yemen pirates to deal with, but we had to deal with a lot of the Iranian Coast Guard, and the Iranian Coast Guard are a pain in the ass. They're always around you, and they're always trying to know what you're doing, where your coordinates, etc., etc. So we have that contingency: Iran, Israel, and that part of NATO. We also have China and Taiwan. That's a very dangerous situation, guys. Do not underestimate that situation. Taiwan is already preparing to evacuate, and they have a lot of their strong companies, their semiconductor companies, moving now to the US, to Arizona, because Taiwan represents such a large market share. If China invades and succeeds, they will have a temporary victory. But if the US decides to really back off, to really push back on China and support Taiwan, this is going to be a war that will happen on many different fronts. Wherever US has problems, that's where you're going to see wars evolve. South America. Who says that South America is fully US? Do you really think that South America would be supporting a country that has economic hitmen, has secret intelligence trying to topple governments who were not US friendly? Look at Venezuela, the history of Venezuela. Brazil now, Bolsonaro not being in the picture is very interesting because he was very pro-BRICS, wasn't very pro-American, neutral to negative towards American. But now this Lila guy, some people think that it wasn't a clear victory, that there was some tampering with the votes. Who knows? But you had millions of people protesting against him and who were pro-Bolsonaro. So Same as Trump. I didn't see millions of people protesting pro Biden. So, questions there. I don't know. But elections can be easily tampered now, especially digitally. I'm not the one counting the votes. You are not counting the votes. So how do we know that votes are really counted for what they truly are? So yeah, okay, interesting things, John Paul. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very, very dangerous situation there with South America. South America has many reasons why not to support US and to be pro China. You have the communist, and at the end of the day, they're factions in the world. You have countries, factions, clubs. It's not that easy. Just because political leaders say one thing or another doesn't mean that that's how things evolve. And also, you have the industries, you have large economic institutions that favor one thing over another. So, very interesting developments. Let's just pray for peace, although peace is not always a solution, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, in this situation, we're going to deal with a lot of things. So yeah, we covered France, we covered the situation with Ukraine a little bit, Iran, US, China. The Chinese protests, I wanted to touch on the Chinese protests because a few weeks ago when I saw footage, I thought, wow, I know for a long time that Chinese people were fed up, especially in Hong Kong, right? Hong Kong is a different situation, but the COVID lockdown, the zero COVID lockdown, really really pushed this chasm. There was really a divide between the people and the communist regime. And although I do think we hear a lot of negative things about China, and China, I think that is not is always demonized. So it's good to also look at Chinese media and get a different perspective. But this COVID zero policy is not going anywhere. It's making things worse. And now the fact that protests are happening in the large industrial centers of China is game over for China. If China doesn't try to negotiate, and find a middle solution, you can't have millions of people unemployed protesting because China depends on its high intensity labor. And China is not the China it was 20 years ago. The newer generations are seeing how the rest of the world is living, and they do not want to follow that pathway of just work, 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 work for the economy of China, of greater China. Once upon a time, the older demographics supported that notion, but that doesn't work anymore, right? And that's the thing. And as always said, autocratic, totalitarian regimes last for a very short time. Why? Because you can never always go against the will of the people. You can go against the will of the people for a little bit, but not for a very long time, because then something happens and ignites everybody to protest because they're so fed up. It's like you're in a toxic relationship with a woman or a man, and you put up with this and that and that, and then one thing happens, you burst, and you know what? You burn the bridges. You say, no more, I'm done with you. So it's the same thing, because we have a relationship with the government directly and indirectly. And in this situation, can you imagine living in that, you know, communist like uh, lifestyle? It's unimaginable, right? Highest surveillance everywhere, social credit score, you know, a housing bubble crisis that has been brewing for many years and is about to set up. So 2023 is going to be a tumultuous year. I can't wait. We're going to be here. We're going to see everything that is unfolding. But these live updates that I'm doing with you guys, I hope I can do them every day. we're going to look into all the things that happened in 2022 and which things are going to spill over to the next year. So thanks so much, John Paul, for your comments. I'm going to look into your comments soon. I appreciate it, and send me any comments you want, and we could have a chat offline as well. But yeah, thank you guys. We went way over the intended timeline here, 50 minutes, but I can talk about these things every day. So yeah, appreciate your support. Like and subscribe, share this video. I want to get more people to have some conversations with. And check out Olympus Aroma. We're sponsored by a very local grassroots company that takes organic, not touched by chemicals or pesticides or anything like that, not chemically treated, organic herbs for our well-being and health, namely oregano oil. We got some very good mountain flower face spray that are very good for the skin. More products to come there, but they're an excellent company. So yeah, check them out too in the description below. Thank you so much again, John Paul, and I will see you guys on another stream. We might do one tomorrow. We'll see how things progress. But yeah, the throat is getting a little bit scratchy. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.